This is Empowered Human Academy. Welcome home.
I think what I want most is just to be an example of what's possible. Like, is mostly just, you don't have to do it like me, but I'm gonna show you some shit that you haven't seen before.
This is about love. This is about light. This is about the idea that you have everything you will ever need.
And this life of yours, this is where you grow, you expand, and you remember who you really are.
I'm Abe.
I'm Isaac.
In Empowered Human Academy, we join with humans of all kinds to feel the inspiration that can only come with empowered living.
The stories you hear today are unique, but the energy you hear today belongs to you too. So, with hearts wide open, let's begin.
Everyone, welcome to this conversation series. We are here today with our good friend, Hailey Thomas, and she is such a badass, and we're so excited for this conversation. Hailey and I met in college. I was kind of the number one volleyball super fan at my university, and she was a volleyball player at Illinois State, and we became friends. We went on service trips together, and Hailey's just a badass. So I'm so excited for her to be here today. And Isaac, can you ask her our introductory question?
So we like to begin by asking about your, chosen is a tricky word here, but the identity that you feel for yourself. People like to introduce themselves by like vocation, or people like to label each other in different ways. What words do you choose for yourself? Who are you?
That is an excellent question. And I will answer as I have been exploring this realm most recently and being very excited about this realm most recently, even if it's not like what I would say is probably the biggest defining piece of me. But I'm Hailey Thomas, and I am a mindset coach for entrepreneurs or people with micro businesses. I help them be very clear about where they're going a year from now and kind of work backwards and figure out who they need to become to create those results that they want to see. I also have another business, which has a digital course and a membership community, and I am really having a great time swimming back and forth between them and coming up with ideas and concepts and then testing them and going, oh, that did not work at all. And then going back and reworking that concept. So that's kind of the place where I'm swimming a lot in, is getting to enjoy and have fun as a business owner.
Cool. What aspects of your like core self really like gets off on this, right? Like how do these things align with who you are? What lights you up about this work?
So I am an Enneagram 3, which is just like, oh, you give me a list. Yeah, Abe knows what's up, of like, let's just pop down the list. Let's just get it going. And so there's so much to standing up a business of the details that I'm just like, wonderful. I can just go to town on that. Something that I've been exploring that I think has been dormant because I spend a lot of time in that Enneagram 3 energy is this like adventuring curiosity. Like I was a very curious child and spent a lot of time just like exploring. Like I would, and I'm doing this with my son now, which is very fun. I got us matching magnifying glasses. And so we just go outside and just like go looking at bugs. And like, we will spend a good 30 minutes looking at a cicada shell. Like that's like an afternoon for us of like, that's so weird. Look at its little thing, you know? So that part gets to come out now too, which I think before when I was an employee, it was very much about like, just do the list, but this lets me do my lists and then pours a whole bunch of like, well, I wonder what will happen if we tried this, or why does that work that way? Where are my customers getting stuck here? So that part has been reintroduced, and that is like very filling. Like it's very filling. So I get to like be very jazzed, but it's anchored by this kind of curiosity, which is fun.
And I see you sharing the things that you learn with people as you understand them. What is that? Is that a cycle that happens for you? Like learning a thing, information back out there?
Yeah. I don't think I would have probably before last year articulated that was the thing I needed, but I've noticed the times in my life when I really struggled to capture my own thoughts, or really struggled with my identity and with my just kind of like situating myself in a place or with people. That's what was missing. I had no feedback loop. I didn't understand what my feedback loop was. Like mine is very different than my husband's is. Right. And I have to actively go out of my way to build containers that will give me the feedback.
Okay. Is that a thing? I'm curious now that you mentioned your husband. Is this a thing that you think everybody has? Like everyone's got some kind of feedback loop? How would you define feedback loop generally?
Yeah. I think of it as a echo chamber might have a negative connotation to it, but it is a little bit of that, of like, this is this thing that I'm putting out there, and it could be via writing, it could be via people, it could be, like Caleb, my husband will like, he needs to like go out to the woods and then like find an analogy that helps him put together in his brain this thought. Like he's like, I don't know, doing whatever wilderness thing he's doing out there. That's not me. But he needs that to be able to like put his thoughts together and kind of organize himself in the place that he's trying to be in. And so I think everyone has them. I think they can be built with intentionality, and we suffer when we just don't sometimes realize what they are or have actually built them with intention. You might just be in a situation where you have that in you.
Just naturally. Okay. At what point did you know that you needed to, or if that's even the right language for it, start your second business? Because your coaching thing you've had for a while, I think, and this other one is newer.
Yeah. So I have 2 co-creators with that brand, and it is almost, there's one of them in particular. It's always like, hey guys, let's build a thing. And we're like, okay, let's look into that. That's my Enneagram thing, my 3 being like, okay, you're wanting this thing, and I know it's going to take this, you know? But building the second business was more about like, now that I felt like I've had my legs under me in my business. So I think, I don't know the best way to explain this, but I think of like the continuum of me building my coaching business. It's had like 3 or 4 iterations of like virtual assistant to project manager to like half and half. I led some retreats and then now into coaching. So through those iterations, I've seen so much and I've tried so many things that like did not work. And I finally feel like, you know, at the beginning of this past year, or even towards the end of last year, like I know what I'm doing. Like, not that everything I'm going to do is magically going to be wildly profitable and be gold, but like I know what I'm looking at.
Yep.
And so when the idea to start up this other piece came, I was like, sure, actually, I know what it takes to get this off the ground, get this stood up. And I'm willing to put in that effort, versus before I had no idea how much effort it was going to take to build anything.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, that makes sense. Congrats on reaching that level of like mastery of the domain. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's been a new, mastery is a great word for it, of like, oh, I've reached this new level of maturity is how I've been talking to my clients about it, from surviving and like being fueled by survival of just like needing to make money, like you've got bills to pay, I just need to figure this out, to switching fuel sources and going, oh, I can create things with this other fuel source now.
Totally.
That's interesting. So does that feel like that sounds like a major pivot? Like I'm thinking of like a workout analogy, like going from something that's short-term high intensity to figuring out how to actually sustain yourself over a marathon. What does that transition feel like?
Real messy.
Yes.
It's very, I didn't realize, like, it's kind of, I think of it, and maybe you're doing, you know, a Whole30 right now. Like, I think of it as like switching from like junk food to whole food, is that it was like pretty painful there at first, because I didn't know how to make money without like needing to make money. I didn't know how to create value without like it being an emergency.
Sure.
Totally. And I'm always curious about what that feels like and what that looks like for everybody, because I feel like in the wellness industry, a lot of things are like, you've hit a wall and you need to like either make money or you need to get healthy again. But how are we healthy every day so that when we reach an obstacle, we have, you know, our mental practices, we have our physical practices, our nutrition practices to help us through. What did going through all of these things look like and feel like for you? Were you embarrassed? Were you hard on yourself as a 3, like being, you know, achievement oriented? It's really, it's easy for 3s to be really hard on themselves because it's like, well, I'm not worthy because this project failed or whatever. What did it look like for you?
It was a lot of that. It's so interesting you bring that up, because I felt like last summer when I was making that transition, like I remember specifically, it was like July through September, I felt very acutely that I was making this transition. So like changing my marketing, changing how I was introducing myself, what people knew me as. And I felt a lot of shame around that. Like I felt terrible because it felt like a failure. It felt like I was starting over. It felt like, the way that I was building this coaching piece of my business, I was trying to be intentional about it not being a survival like thing, which means like there's a lot more experimentation and it's slower and it's calmer. It's slower mainly, which is what my person had issue with.
Totally.
And so I felt a lot of shame around it. And I hadn't identified that until early this year of like, oh, that's why I felt like garbage. I was feeling so much like just gross about that it wasn't like clean and fast.
Yeah.
And so, which is, again, the Whole30 is a wonderful analogy of like that just grossness you feel those first few days of like, this is not pretty. I'm bloated. I feel horrible. I'm not sleeping well. Like everything just feels gross. So that's what it felt a lot like to me. But what I did was like, I made it my business to sell myself on the change, like made it my business to talk to myself about like, this is why you're doing this, Hailey. And this wasn't for like nobody else was reading these notebooks. I wasn't writing this anywhere. This was just, this is why we're doing this. We're making the switch. It's going to mean this for you. It's going to be so great. Like hyping myself up about the transition and like comforting myself about like, yeah, that was really messy. That was super gross and it's fine.
And it being okay. Like it just is what it is. Right. Yeah.
Can you, I'm connecting this to what you said a couple minutes ago about the evolution of, or into what is now your coaching practice, like starting with virtual assistants and all of those things. And you just talked about how like the shame and the talking yourself through it and the selling yourself on it piece. Can you talk to me about what happens before each metamorphosis? Like how did you realize that the virtual assistantship was to give way to its next incarnation, like that sort of thing? What did that feel like? How did the idea come to you? All of that.
Yeah. I think it's very useful that you mentioned that it's like a series of shifts. And so that's helpful because I can kind of go back and look. I think the first shift of like the VA business doesn't fit anymore was the messiest of the ones, kind of like, the beginning, the first iteration of a business. It's just messy because you don't know what to expect. You have no idea what to expect. And so all I felt was this wasn't working. This is not how I want to spend my time. And I kind of had a, not like a freak out mode, but it was a little bit of like, it was kind of, very messy. And I had a small team at that point. I had a small agency. And so I was basically just like released our current clients to like my people and was like, okay, go, because I'm melting down and I can't do, like, it was not clean at all, which again, felt horrible as an Enneagram 3. Like I could have done that better. But then I was left in this space of like, okay, well, if we don't have any VA clients and you need to make money, what do we do? So then again, I initially was fueled again by survival. So then that next iteration again was going, okay, this doesn't feel good. And it felt like, what did it feel like? It felt like disappointing. It felt like my as far as what people could see, like my messaging, the way I would introduce myself, like all those things felt inconsistent. I was trying a lot of things and that felt messy because I'm like, oh, so-and-so met me 2 weeks ago, but now I'm saying this and I should change what my LinkedIn says. And not, like, it was just like frenetic. Like it was just like frazzled. So then making that switch from that energy from survival to thrival, that's not a word. We're going to pretend that's a word. Changing that fuel source again was like, okay, last 2 times it felt crappy. And that was a trigger for you of like, hey, like a flag, like something isn't working here. Let's switch again, kind of, experimental mode. Let's switch again. What is it that you actually want? Like, where are you trying to go? What thing are you trying to find? And how do we build that? Which felt bad, like the times it had before, but I knew what to expect at that point.
Totally.
Interesting. So like learning the responses that you're likely to expect from yourself as you embark on a new transformation.
I think when you're in it and have no concept of like mind tools, like the same way we have tools for working out or for like, when you have no concept of it, it feels like an emergency and like you're drowning and everything is just super broken. And that is wrong and that is a problem. But when you have the tools to be able to look at it and say, nope, this is actually exactly how it's supposed to feel. And this is exactly the response your brain normally has. And this is what we're going to do next. It still feels bad, but you know that it's just a part of what's happening.
Sure. Totally. You're bigger than that experience.
Well, and I'm coming back to the whole Enneagram 3 thing because I'm an Enneagram 3 and I have been notoriously hard on myself. I was telling you before this recording that it took me like 10 years to work through my owning of my light and owning of the message that I have for the world, because I was just like, I felt like an imposter, or I felt like when something didn't go as planned, I was like, oh, shame on Abe. Like, why is it just natural to build a business, or like whatever it is? So as you're a mindset coach, right? And you help, small businesses and CEOs. How does that, like, on your personal side, how does your lived experience like translate to your business? Like, because I feel like they're interconnected.
They're the same thing. Yeah.
They're the same thing, right? So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, they are. It's pretty fun because before I had the second business, the feedback loop was like, this is what I'm experiencing. This is probably what my clients are experiencing. And so I could kind of like, experience something, come up with a concept for coaching them through it, coach them through it, go back and rework the concept. Like, so that was that loop there. But they are exactly the same thing. I'll just give a brief. So I have a client who was feeling so much shame around sharing what she did for work, which she's a personal stylist. Like, it's not anything dramatic, but just because of her upbringing and whatever, she felt shame for starting her own thing. And we were talking so much about shame, and then how you present and how you talk about yourself, and allowing yourself to be excited about what you created, but you're afraid that other people are going to feel bad, whatever. So we had that whole conversation. And then our next meeting, she comes back and she was like, I just had the biggest conversation with my boyfriend because he was feeling this way about this other, like, totally non-related thing to business at all. But it's like, when you have the tools, you can then apply said tools to anything you want. And so to me, it's like, it's literally all the same, especially for people who are, creating their own path. Like, you get to pick. You don't have to put everything in containers of like, this is the now work stuff or whatever. You get to pick how those pieces play together. And in my mind, a hammer is a hammer. You can use it outside on the shed, or you can use it inside in the bathroom. Like,
amen.
I'm curious for you though, you'd mentioned like the process of owning who you are, Abe. And like, one of the reasons I love you all is because you are two very different people that are going towards the same goal, but you are like very like different people. Did either of you, because I've had this struggle too, did either of you struggle with like not becoming like each other, or like seeing like, this is your journey to figuring out your you-ness and this is my journey, but let me like, kind of keep myself from becoming like you?
Totally. Yes, that's a really great question. We've been together for over 6 years, and for, the beginning chunk of it, I think as we continue to grow together, we sometimes on both ends felt like we had to like specifically what the other person liked, or do what the other person did, to the point where we felt like we might have been losing ourselves a bit, or like threatened that we were. But we have impeccable communication skills, and we're really good at asking like, okay, you're acting this way. Why are you acting this way? Because it's not about the freaking dishes. It's not like truly what's going on. Mm-hmm. So when we realized, specifically Isaac realized that and me, honestly, that my way doesn't need to be his way and his way doesn't need to be my way. And we do have we have plenty of overlapping tendencies and beliefs. We can be our authentic selves without feeling threatened that we are losing a part of ourselves.
Yeah, the motivations there are probably the motivations for like accidentally becoming the other person are probably different, coming from like, I'm an Enneagram 9/3.
Yeah.
Which is useful because when I'm like in my fullness, I behave a lot like you do on a normal day.
Yep.
So there's that.
And when I'm unhealthy, I act like an apathetic 9, which like, so we can see each other's tendencies. Yeah. I can push, when he's in his fullness, I'm like, ooh, boo, I'm like connecting with you. You are acting like me. And I'm like, let's fucking go. And then when he sees that I'm like truly like disconnected to myself, he's like, what's going on? Because I know what that feels like. Yeah. And it's so different from like me being powerful, feeling powerful at least.
Yeah. It like when I found myself accidentally becoming or starting to emulate you was because I was afraid of conflict. And so like keeping the peace let me do things the way that you do things or think about things in that way. And I had to become okay with a form of disconnection so as to become all of myself, which lets me show up better and all that.
And then we would see ourselves becoming trepidatious about like, well, I don't want to, I'm like, I want to market something or position my business or go in this small little, on this small little path that might be different from the way Isaac would do it. And I have his voice in my head because he's so passionate about, he's so grounded in what he believes in. I'm like trepidatious about even doing it, which makes me a lot less bold. And that's not me though. So we have to talk about that. And he's like, we both have called each other out saying like, don't be trepidatious. We need to like act in our fullness. And if you're feeling like disconnected to yourself because of something I did or something that I believe in, cut that shit out because we need to be in our authentic selves. And then because there are ways that those two can connect, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, that was just a master class on how to carve your own path. No, but really, like it really is about, that's everything you all just said was kind of the stuff that you have to have in the back of your mind when you're deciding to create something that is your own. And so there's a whole, especially in the like lifestyle business or luxury or not luxury, lifestyle or like micro business, like model, like there's like a way to do it and what it should look like and be like. And if you spend too much time trying, and again, it may not even be on purpose, but emulate people that you really look up to and have those voices in your head, like you'll become like them on accident.
And a lot of that's good. And a lot of that's good, in my opinion. I am so grateful that I am like Isaac in a lot of ways now. But if that comes at the expense of losing my authentic light, it's not worth it because that's not me then, right?
So you mentioned that for your first business and maybe also for your second, I'm not sure. You mentioned at least that you have co-creators. Turning this question back to you, which well asked, by the way. The question of co-creation for me often does feel like a question. Frankly, I haven't been very good at it over time. How do you navigate like having vision with more than one person? What does creative execution and realization look like? What is your path for co-creation?
I think it's a lot of what you just said together, right? Because you all are co-creating like a whole life together and then multiple businesses on top of it. So you're not too terrible at it, Isaac. you're part of co-creating that.
It's gotten better for sure.
Yeah. I think for us, it's been a lot of like, we've had many, many, many conversations about what each person's expectation is and what they see and what they're visioning. And then we gave everyone jobs, like roles. So like a big part of my role is the project management and is the, hiring the people and who do we need to have on this project and where we should slate this project based off of the giant list and I love my co-creators, but the giant list that they've created. And so we've said, this is my job. Part of my job is to put a kibosh on like, okay, well, you just said this project and that project, so we're not doing one of them. And that's what they expect of me. And so we've been very explicit about like what people's jobs are and agreed on that on the front end. And we check it. I mean, probably every month we're having these like meta conversations about where the business is going and, how it should be set up and what people's jobs are. That's been pretty stinking important for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you do when two like seemingly incompatible creative visions surface simultaneously?
So I go into coaching mode often.
Yeah.
Anything can be solved with coaching. Let me just see. So it is typically of the three of us, we've got one person who is a visionary and she has a couple of very large businesses and like, she's like, hey, I see this thing for us 5 years from now. And then we have another person who is our subject matter expert for this brand, but she is likes things very simple and is, I think, newer to exploring like where this can take her and like how big she can be and she can get. And so those two clash often. And so then I get to play the fun mediator role, which to me is legitimately fun, of like, hey, tell me about that. Like what are you feeling? Like, tell me more about it. And now that I'm talking about this, I don't quite remember your initial question, but like I feel like that's my reaction, is to jump in a mediator role and kind of get to be curious about like, well, what are you afraid of if we move too quickly? And hey, what are your expectations on this business? Because right now it's here. Tell me more about what you wish you could see that we don't currently have. And so there's usually a way to kind of mitigate those things, but that's usually where I go to, is like, help me understand why you're generating this thought or this feeling. And then like, there's probably a legitimate solve we can have.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah. Tracing it down and seeing where it goes.
Yeah. So mindset coach, and I feel like you are so multifaceted. You're an athlete, you work with so many different types of people as a coach. And, you know, like I'm a coach too. So we see so many different walks of life, so many different thought patterns. We understand our Enneagram numbers. So I know my clients like Enneagram numbers. So I'm like, I'm going to talk to an 8, totally different than the way I talk to a 9 or a 2 or a 1, because they're just processing information differently. But in your, like, as a 3 and as an achiever, like I'm kind of harping back on how we're sometimes hard on ourselves. How, and in this course, I'm talking about how to stop being an asshole to yourself, right? How have you been an asshole to yourself, and what's that journey been like to giving yourself more compassion in starting new businesses, becoming a mom, like all of these things that you're presented with, like present new opportunities to learn. How have you done that?
Self-coach?
Yeah. How do you self-coach?
Yeah. Excellent question. And as you can tell, I'm a giant coaching nerd because I just got real hype. So one of the practices that I have is in the mornings and in the evenings, I do a thought download, or just like a brain dump. And I have become very attuned to hearing the thoughts that kind of like a ticker tape, just like scroll past my brain. I may or may not pick up on whether or not they're there during the day, but they're always kind of going across. And that's often where all that bullshit lives. It's just like kind of in a constant scroll across my head of you're not moving fast enough. You need to work harder. Why haven't you done all the things you said were on your list? Sam needs this from you, and Caleb needs this from you. Like, you know, your family needs stuff, like, and you're working right now, but you should probably be caring for your, like, all that's, it just kind of scrolls. And so one of my practices is to capture it and to like write it down, because then when I can look at it, I can go like, who am I? Like, what?
Totally.
I said that to myself. I did that. Totally. And so being able to like look at it on paper and not censor myself, because I think that's part of the issue. It's like, it's like, you don't want to believe you would ever be so mean to yourself. Like, you would never say that out loud, but then you also then don't fix, like, you don't get deep enough to like scoop the stuff out, because you're like, you know, it's like a shitty boyfriend you've had. You're like, no, he's not that bad. Like, it's not that bad.
Totally. When in reality, it's like crushing your soul every day, and it's so subconscious. And it's so repeatable that like you don't even recognize it. And then you wake up and that affects every single part of your life. How to like unfuck your mind or stop being an asshole to yourself. Like, because as humans, I feel like we've been, I mean, in our culture, you know, we're around the same age. Like, we've been kind of wired to maybe doubt ourselves, or, you know, when I kind of give this example of when you talk to your son, you like lift him up, you're curious with him. And then at a certain age, we're just like, well, they're too much, or well, like, don't think that now. It's like, when I'm always fascinated about, like, was there a point in your life where you realized that you were being an asshole to yourself, or like were hard on yourself, or whatever that looks like?
I think it kind of comes back to that survival, thrival switch was like, especially as I was getting into sports, that what's unfortunate is that fear is a pretty good motivator short term. Like, it's like junk food. Like, your body will respond to fear. And so, yeah, it works actually to be hard on yourself for a sprint, for the short term. Whether or not it's a good fuel is a separate, or sustaining is like a separate thing. But like, it works in the short term. When you're afraid, you act. And so I often, you know, remember like when getting into the sport of like, Hailey, figure this out, because if not, you're going to get kicked off the team and then you won't be like, just whatever. And so that's for me when I still like 8th grade, I think. Okay. Actually, that was it, because that was when I realized that you couldn't get D's and be on the sports teams. And the only reason I failed classes is because I would like bring books to class and like read during class. I was very like airy, kind of like, not an airhead, but like I was very just like, Hailey is out there somewhere. Yeah. She's got this book, like she's just kind of gone somewhere. And that was when that stopped, was because I was like, oh, I have to like fix this because then I can't play. If I like fail these classes, I can't play. So that's a very interesting thing you just reminded me of. But yeah, it's like, I think it typically has to do with when we meet the outside world, right? Like that's when it starts to, like, there's expectations of you, and I think it's harder to choose yourself and what's best for you than it is to just give this person or this thing, this experience, what it needs from you, without training, you know what I mean? Like, unless you deliberately think about it, it seems like the better of the two choices.
Sure. That makes sense. And I resonate with that too, like deliberately learning to do that for oneself is a thing. What are you, like, and it may be that, but what are you deliberately learning right now? Like what concept are you aware of wanting to bring into yourself that you haven't quite gotten there yet? What's in process right now?
This survival to thrival thing, I hadn't thought so deeply about until it came up with 2 different clients like 2 weeks ago. And I was like, what is that? Why is that? What is that? And so I'm trying to put words around switching fuel and that concept.
Good metaphor.
Yeah, it's an excellent metaphor. So one of the things I'm trying to capture right now is, what exactly does survival mode look like? Like, how do you know when you're there? Because if you've always been there, you don't know how to tell like what's normal and what's helpful, because those are 2 different things. What's regular and what's helpful are 2 different things. So trying to put like, you're here when these are your patterns of thought.
Yeah.
This is what the messy transition was probably going to look like. And when you're in thrival mode, I gotta come up with a better word for that, but when you're there, this is what it feels like. There's this groundedness to it. Before we started, I was like telling Abe that every time I see him, he's becoming more of himself. And it's so fun to watch that, because what's happening, or what I can sense from you, is a settledness.
Yes.
Like, you're still you, but you were like so settled. It's fantastic to watch. And so you've transitioned, and this is constant iteration. We'll be transitioning towards this the rest of our lives. Yeah. But I can see it so apparently, because we don't talk that often. I can see it so apparently in you.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Cool.
Yeah.
And this is fascinating too, because we spend a lot of time talking about like what it looks like to be like in the latter state. But I told, like, this idea hasn't occurred to me. And so I'm glad that you said it, to be able to put words and to draw a line around what it looks like to not be there yet, or to be in the other phase, the before phase, being able to define that so that you know what it is, so you can step out of it. Well, that's super interesting.
And that kind of connects with your question on how do you be your authentic self with each other, is we know what it feels like to feel good. And that's our baseline now. So so even this morning, Isaac was in a little mental funk, and it's just dramatically different than when he's not in it. And now we've come to the point where we're able to like work with it, because we can spot it.
You know what it is.
There's sometimes he doesn't even need to talk to me, and I'm like, hey babe, what's going on? He's like, how did you know? I'm like, dude, there's truly an energy shift in the house. Like, it's wild.
And it's much more, well, I'm much more effective in navigating those things now, because I know the difference between that state and myself. Like, I recognize that that's a place that I can occupy, but it's not me, and that unloads a lot.
And I think that's something too. All of this, especially as we're teaching people not to be assholes to yourself, like, you will go drift back and forth between camps all of the time. The goal is just to spend more of your time in the not asshole state. Yeah. And that's just part of the human condition, is like, you will go back and forth literally from now into eternity. It is the wonder and sometimes horror of being a human being.
And being compassionate with ourselves when we are in the asshole state, because we're able to identify it. We have the tools to work with it. Like, if your muscles are sore, you have tools to like unknot, right? Like, they're going to get sore as you work, right?
I've started to get to a point where I can see myself with like some of the entertainment that you might see a kid who just is like stuck in a rut and they have no idea what they're doing. It's like, I've started to be able to get to a place where I can laugh at myself, like, oh no, you're like, this is juvenile mental behavior.
Yeah.
We might be stuck here for a minute, but it's not forever. It's okay.
Well, and that happens, like what you were saying, post survival mode. right? Because if you're trying to survive, you don't have the capacity to even figure it out.
Yeah.
One of my clients is I'm working with, and I'm helping them like get out of burnout, and they didn't even know that they were in burnout, but they were like sleeping all the time, and they were working so many hours, and they had no energy. And now I had him take a break from work for like a week, and he's just like, I haven't felt this good in 5 years.
Mm.
Yeah, like he didn't even know that's where he was.
Totally. Have you seen that happen with your clients in your life? With that aha moment when they're like, oh, I was being an asshole to myself, or, oh, like I can start identifying when things aren't healthy for me.
Yeah. It always comes up. It always comes up when clients, they'll say something, they'll be like, oh, but actually I think it's this. Is that right? Or they'll be like, yeah, you're probably going to tell me this thing next. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Exactly. So you know where you are. You and I are both on the same page about where we are right now.
Okay.
So it's fun to see. It's so much. I'm so glad you're doing this work, because it's so powerful to be able to know where you are on the map, because you cannot make a change unless you know where you are on the map. And then you can go, flag, that's a behavior, flag, that's a thought. And then you get to choose. You get to choose whether or not to entertain it. You get to choose whether or not to do anything about it. To be honest, like sometimes I'm in shit moods and I'm like, can identify that this is a shit mood. It's not producing action like I want it to. And it's fine. I'm gonna go eat some Cheetos and watch a TV show. Like knowing that tomorrow I will be in a different place and it's fine. But you get the power to control what happens.
Yes. Have you always been in a space where you feel like you have the power to do that?
God, no, not at all. Like that's so much of starting my business was like uncovering that for myself. So I know a lot of people who are like, especially as a mom and in some mom communities, that you are not your work and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, no, I am my work, in that like, it's just been it's been the most fun, like dinosaur dig, like the most fun, like what's next? And let me uncover this. And how does this work? And how does it translate to marriage and parenting? And like, I am my work in that way. And I think it's very fun, but that's when I started to like recognize those things, because I was going to other people and like, even as a virtual assistant, like watching the CEOs that I was working with of like, okay, so this seems unhealthy and we should probably talk about it.
Totally.
And then them recognizing like, oh, this is not who I want to be or where I want to be situated.
And how has that impacted your relationship with your husband and your son?
I will give you one example from each. I have to be very careful not to coach my husband. He does not like that. And I slip into that often. So that's something I have to like, tell me what you need from me right now, because I really want to coach you. So that is a challenge for me. I will say, like, that's hard for me to like, especially as a 3, where I'm like, oh, I got the tools now. I can solve that. Let's go. And he's like, we don't need that right now. So for him, with him, I think it's useful because he's starting to pay more attention to his thoughts and how they motivate or, unmotivate him. But that is like a thing we are actively like, okay, Hailey, calm down, going in. What's been, I don't know if that's a highlight of motherhood for me, but it's like pretty close to the top, is my son being able to identify his feelings. So we put him in this like private micro school thing. So it's a teacher and a handful of kids and they're whatever. And Sam and I, my son and I, talk all the time about his feelings, and how they aren't like, you aren't, him as a person isn't ever bad or good. Like there's you, and then there's this thing that you did, which may or may not be helpful to our household. So we talk a lot about feelings being the same way, of like, any feeling is welcome to come and visit you, but like, you are not the feeling. It's like a separate thing from you. Like you can come, it can hang out, but it's not you. So at his little micro school this past week, his teacher emailed me and she was like, Sam did this thing. And at first I was like, what did he do? But she said that he looked upset. She wasn't really sure and went like, how are you feeling? Are you okay? And his response to her was, I don't know how I feel yet, but can I tell you in about 5 minutes so I can think about it? Right? I was like, oh, okay.
Gosh.
He went to her and said, I'm feeling sad and nervous because I don't always know what's going to happen next on the schedule. And I was just like,
I'm going to cry. That's so powerful. Oh my God.
like it may, I don't know if it's like the highlight of me being a parent, but that was just like, holy hell. Like to be able to, I know full grown adults who cannot explicitly state what it is they need in a scenario and identify feeling. I couldn't for a long time.
No, totally. It's not
so that to me is like, I've gifted him this like thing where you can go use this tool now. Yeah. I was like, I mean, yeah, of course my kid did that.
I love it.
But it was incredible. Yeah.
Wow.
That's fantastic. Congratulations to both of you.
Right?
So
That's
cool.
the kind of stuff that gets like extra TV time and ice cream at our house.
Hell yeah, for sure.
Emotional maturity, getting the ice cream. Hell yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome. That segues into really nicely into some like closing thoughts here. A question that I think I want to start asking and I haven't yet, so this is my first time. What do you have inside of you that you know the world needs?
That's a great question.
That is a great question. So what I have on my board here is this quote by T.D. Jakes, and I wrote it like, he didn't say this to me, I don't know this man, but he said it, I wrote it to myself. But Hailey, you are not ordinary, and because of you, generations will be affected. And I've kind of got this thought, I don't know what to say about it, but I think what I want most is just to be an example of what's possible. Like, is mostly just, you don't have to do it like me, but I'm gonna show you some shit that you haven't seen before.
Yes.
And just so that you know, like it's possible. And I think that's like, as I think about my legacy and about, I mean, I've got nieces and nephews and my own child, and I'm having so many fun conversations with them about, you know, the history of our family has always been about survival mode. Always. Every single generation up until now has just been trying to make it through. And I'm about to show you some shit that you haven't seen before.
Let's go.
So yes, that's my answer to that question.
Hell yeah.
Awesome.
So good. I have a couple ending questions. You're a mindset coach, and we'll put your information in this video for people to look at your work. And what is a tool that you have for people who are watching this video, who are, you know, ready to change their life, they just don't know how, or they might want different examples of how to, right? What are some, maybe one or two tools that you have learned through your coaching and through your lived experience that you can share with people watching this?
So I'll give one that's kind of in that self-coaching space. And we sort of alluded to the beginning of it, like write things down. Like there's a magical thing that happens between your brain and your understanding when you can see something on paper that has been sort of half floating around in your head. But I tell my clients to do thought downloads. Do not question it. Literally just write down the thoughts, write everything down. And none of the thoughts, to be fair, like no thought is like good or bad. They're pretty much neutral. It's just, is it helping you be where you want to be or not? So do a thought download, flag the thoughts that are not helpful, and then question them. All you have to do is ask, how could this not be true? Or like, how could the opposite of this statement be true? And just by doing that, you'll start to like open your mind up to possibility. And then the other one, so there's like a little self-coaching model, like just do that over and over again. And you'll be like so surprised at what your brain, like, you're like, I didn't even know I was thinking that and didn't know that I didn't think this was a possibility. That's magic in and of itself. The other thing that I would offer is just to like spend time imagining, which is hard for threes because we're like, we don't have time for that. I don't know what you're saying. Imagine things, but like, I think, again, one of the useful things that I did before when I was young was just like imagine all of the time. Playing pretend all of the time was so fun, and it was so useful because it created this expansive world where I had lots of options. And so we get into a place where like we don't do that anymore. So we can't even bring things into possibility for ourselves because we haven't even thought that it was there, you know? So I would say just spend time imagining and like thinking and, I don't know, sitting with like stuff that you wish were possible. Most of those things definitely are, but you just have to like have fun with it. Like imagine it. What would it be like? What might that sound like to someone? How fun would that be? Yeah.
I love that. And as I'm a 3-wing 4, so I do imagine a lot because I'm like dreaming. And I think maybe like, would you say in your lived experience that what you're building, you're like always thinking about, which would you consider that dreaming?
Yes. Yeah. Like what, it's like a curiosity piece. It's like, I wonder what would happen if this was a thing.
Yes, for sure. And I think from, your experience and our lived experience, like so much good comes from like just thinking what could be that might not be real right now or not be in our reality right now. And that's why we're having this conversation, right? Because we've shown up and we've dreamt and we've dreamed, and we've showed up for ourselves. So what does an empowered Hailey look like and feel like?
She's so cool. She's a person I like think about all the time.
Yes.
Empowered Hailey is empowered Hailey is very curious and is very I kind of think of her a little bit as a mad scientist where she's like, I don't know, let's go try that. Let's go do that. Yeah. And so she is like she is not all over the place in a frenetic energy, sure, but like, oh, I don't know. Let's go see. That's what Hailey empowered looks like. She's constantly like, I don't know. Let's go see.
Totally. And that's why I've resonated with you since the beginning, is because I sense that energy of like just expansive and more. And it's like you're open, like just such an open energy, which I really appreciate about you. So last final question, unless you have any questions for Hailey.
I'll ask it. Last question. What do you know for sure?
Oh, how fun. I know for sure that we get lots of chances and that nothing is wrong or broken by taking all of said chances. Take all of them and keep trying all of the things. I know for sure. Oh man, I don't know what this is going to sound like, but I know for sure, like I'm about to do some wild shit next year. So that's going to be really fun.
Yes.
Awesome.
And I know for sure, like my clients are they're so great. Like they're just so smart and cool and interesting. Those are things I know for sure.
Phenomenal.
My soul is feeling all the light and groundedness. And I mean, I feel like sometimes I get teary-eyed a bit based on like how beautiful life is, because the fact that like we're sitting here, you're in Illinois, we're in Colorado, having this like really in-depth conversation for 45 minutes is like, and it's just flowing. It's just so nice. It's so beautiful. I mean, like what a gift to like experience it, and what a gift to have the viewers watching this experience your magic and your boldness and your badassery. Like, I'm just so grateful.
And your play, I'll throw that word into, like for you to respond immediately to what do you know for sure with how fun. That's awesome.
Yep.
That's
so
awesome.
I hope everyone who's watching this / listening to this has taken a lot, and I know we have. So thank you so much, Hailey, for your time, for your energy, for who you are. We really love you.
I love you guys too. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
This podcast is the work of Lightward, our company, named for that toward the light direction which informs every single thing that we do, including money, which means, like everything else, the way we earn revenue is not based on industry norms. It's based on what feels deeply right and aligned by passing through the door that feels like it has more behind it, not less. And the way we keep this podcast going is all Lightward. It's pay what feels good. It's an exchange of value between you and us. We're keeping conventional podcast advertising totally out of this. And here's how Pay What Feels Good works. We give you this episode because it feels good to do so. And you consider, honestly, what number of dollars this episode is genuinely worth to you. I do not care if that's $3, $1,000, or literally $0 and a heart emoji, as long as that trade genuinely makes your day better. And the energy there is the entire point. That is what we're building our business on. No advertisers, no selling your attention, just you and us, trading value in a way that builds us both up. So whatever the number, when you're done listening, head to empoweredhumanacademy.com and hit the Pay What Feels Good button. We use this policy across all of our company's work, and I'm really excited to bring it here to the world of podcasts. This is us voting for the world we want to see. Thank you for being here.